All right, volume 2, let's get this show on the road. Usual disclaimer, I'm gonna be talking kind of a lot about Stampede in this video simply because it's the only other Trigun that I know. My intent is not to pit the two versions against each other, but just to compare and contrast. And also, no talking about Trigun Maximum in the comments. I've read like 2 chapters of Trimax, so just keep the discussion to these first 2 volumes for now. As a warning, there will be discussion of sexual assault later in this video, but not until the end, and I'll put a timestamp if you want to skip past that. So, volume 2, in summary. Legato Blue Summers, on behalf of Knives, finds Vash and warns him that Knives is about to return, and there are 12 assassins currently out to find Vash. Vash fights the first of those assassins, Monv the Gale, and he beats him but lets him go. He then fights the second one, e.g. the Mine, on the outskirts of town, beats him really easily. In the meantime, Legato is going on a number of killing sprees in Junora Rock and assembling the rest of these assassins in the process. Vash and the girls are traveling on a bus and they run into Wolfwood. He travels with them until they reach Junora Rock, where he meets up with Legato and the rest of the assassins as they attempt to resurrect Knives. Vash fights the third assassin, a woman named Dominique the Cyclops. He wins. And then as Vash confronts the resurrected Knives, he forces Vash's angel arm, the same power that wiped July City off the face of the map. He forces that power to come out and fire again. Vash is a little more successful in mitigating the damage caused by his angel arm and forces it to just blast up into the sky, blasting a hole in the moon. And then he disappears off the face of the planet for at least 2 years. The end. Coming into this manga from Stampede, I think was a bit of a double-edged sword because there's a lot introduced in the back half of this original manga run that has no context for anything. And I think if you went into this not knowing anything about Trigun, it might be kind of hard to navigate. So on the one hand, having a bit of world building present in my brain from Stampede already was very helpful. But on the other hand, I have to weigh everything that I already know against what's in the manga to filter out what's actually helpful background world building and what directly contradicts the manga canon. It's helpful already knowing that plants are these alien life forms that produce things and are necessary for human survival on this planet. But what's not helpful is as soon as I'm introduced to the gung-ho guns, I automatically assume, okay, these are all people that are already part of Knives' organization and they're all people that the doctor had experimented on. Like, none of that is in the story, and there are things that directly contradict that backstory for certain characters. So I have to kind of backtrack and reroute where my brain was going a couple different times. Another thing, the art style really cleans up and refines in this volume. The further we go into the story, the better everything looks. There were a few moments in volume 1 where I'm like, why he built like that? But it feels like Naito Sensei really found his footing, especially in the last 2 to 3 chapters. The action panels are still noisy and cluttered, but I found it a lot easier to keep track of the flow of the action and understand what was going on. The book opens with Vash visiting a shoemaker, and then Vash and the girls are just playing with some kids in the street in some town. And Legato just appears out of nowhere. Vash doesn't seem to know him, but he recognizes that he's a threat. And it seems like Legato is able to communicate with Vash telepathically because they're having this conversation, but no one else is aware of it. So Legato, which interesting name. I wonder why he's named Legato, because that's a musical term, right? You have different modes of playing an instrument. Marcato, which is for emphasis, staccato, which is like sharp, quick notes, but then legato is the term for playing notes very smoothly and connected. I don't know. Maybe he just has that name because it's cool. But yeah, Legato warns Vash that Knives is coming back, and there are 12 assassins now coming for Vash. Each assassin is carrying half a coin. I don't know what the coin thing was for. Maybe it's just for identification. There's a lot of people after Vash, right? So he'll know if it's one of the 12 gung-ho guns, if it's someone carrying half a coin. To me, it just seems like an unnecessary gamification of this whole process. But then Legato hints that like something is gonna happen if someone collects all the pieces of the coins. So now we got like a MacGuffin plot in the background. I don't know, it just seems like a weirdly elaborate plan. Like, why go through all the trouble of sending all these people after Vash when it seems like Knives wants Vash to be there when he resurrects? Clearly Knives doesn't want Vash dead, or he doesn't want him killed by someone that's not him. But why turn it into a game? Why warn Vash in the first place? Why send him on all these little side quests instead of just sending Legato with an invitation like, hey, Knives is going to resurrect in this place on this day. Come and see him. Is it just as petty as Knives and Legato trying to force Vash to kill people? But if that's the case, then why waste so many skilled assassins? Vash doesn't kill any of them, but when they fail, they either kill themselves or are killed by Legato. These are like the 12 most powerful assassins in the world. I feel like you could get better use out of them. I don't know, dude. But Knives doesn't even feel like the main villain of this volume. Honestly, it's Legato, and he's really scary. Like, Knives just appears at the very end once he's been reborn, but Legato is the main antagonist, causing problems, killing people, acting extremely erratic. I don't yet know what motivates him. I can kind of predict what Knives is going to think or do because I know, or I have an idea of the kind of person he is and what he wants. Legato, he's a human, right? So why does he want Knives to succeed in destroying all of humanity? Legato he wants to kill, but only sometimes, and doesn't have a lot of rhyme or reason as to who he chooses to kill. And it seems like the only thing that really restrains him is his own whim or Nye's tight leash, because he worships Nye. Honestly, as scary as Legato is, he's really pathetic. Like, bro, I know that Knives is like the most powerful being on the planet, but you gotta calm down, man. He's not gonna kiss you. I don't know. Either I'm thinking about it too much and it's one of those things you just gotta roll with to make the plot flow, or there's a piece of the puzzle that I'm missing. But that first scene with Legato talking to Vash is really tense because he gives one of the street kids a snack and pats the kid on the head. And to any observer, it's like, oh, that was a nice gesture. But like, Vash knows that this is a threat because Legato's like, I could just kill everybody right now, right here, but I won't. Like, why? What is his reason? There is nothing stopping him from doing that. But the tension in that scene is really quite good. And to top it all off, Legato leaves, and he leaves a bag that he was carrying on the bench where he was sitting. And in the bag is the head of the shoemaker that Vash visited. And this is kind of where we see that Legato can mask his presence from people because nobody seemed to notice that he was there. And nobody saw him go to the shoemakers. Like, Vash gets arrested as a murder suspect because he was the last one seen at the shoemakers. So while Vash is in jail, we have a flashback to the Seeds ship. And we get a little bit of information on Rem, which I really like, because she's so important. She's so important to this story, but I feel like sometimes she's just relegated to dead anime mom. But she seems to me like such a vibrant and noble woman, and I want to know more about her. I want to know about this incredible woman that was able to inspire Vash so much. She chose to be part of Project Seeds because she had no one left on Earth. She went off into space, into the great unknown, because she had nothing left to lose. And I just think for someone that lonely, how wonderful it must have been for her to be needed, right? Because she's the officer on the ship that takes care of everything while everyone else is sleeping. She's the one that everyone needs to rely on. And then to become a mother, to be given children to love and to look after she embarked on this mission because she had no one. There's someone named Alex, possibly a lover or a family member, that Rem lost before she started working for Project Seeds. Her self-sacrificing actions are motivated by this man who must have also been selfless and sacrificial. And I think it's a beautiful picture of how love echoes throughout eons. Vash loves because he was loved by Rem, and Rem was loved by Alex, and Alex must have been loved by someone, and that someone was probably loved by someone else. I always think of the concept that was first introduced to me in the movie Interstellar. I remember when I first saw it as a teenager, it just blew my mind. The concept that love is the one force in the universe that can transcend time and space and even death. And Knives too was loved by Rem, and I think he will remember that before the end. He even says in the flashback that he wanted to save her, but then when she got all self-sacrificey, that's not a word, but when she got all self-sacrificey and tried to save everyone else, that's when he changed his mind. And it's crazy, because it's not just that Knives wanted all of humanity to die, but he seems to think that he and Vash have a right to rule the universe. He says that letting humanity live would be like unleashing a virus on our universe. Also worth noting that Knives' face is... Knives. I should call him Knives. Knives' face is never shown in any of these flashbacks. He's always facing away, or his face is in shadow, or the panel is cropped to just show part of him. So that whole flashback is Vash sitting in a jail cell, remembering all of that. He sits there in his rage and his grief, and the moment the girls show up to see him in jail, his face just turns so soft. And I'm certain that is not a front. That is real. He really loves them. I think having someone in his life to love and to look after is what helps keep him kind. I don't know the last time that he had friends. When Vash is still in jail, that's when number one of the assassins attacks Monv the Gale. He has a completely different backstory in this.
What was that?
Okay. James? It's just my dog. I didn't realize she was in here. You gave me a heart attack. Where was I? Right, okay. And there's this big fight all over town, and Vash's arm gets shot off in the fight. And I kind of forgot that he had a prosthesis until right when I read that. He'll be fine. It's a fake arm. But he's still in handcuffs from the jail. So there's this absolutely metal panel of him mid-fight with his severed prosthetic still cuffed to his other arm. It looks so cool. I really want to see that in the show. And Vash, he's able to win the fight and get the upper hand on Monv. He jams his gun into his eye socket and puts out his eye, and Monv begs for his life. Vash doesn't want to leave him alive. It's like you can see him in the pictures. You can see him mentally talking himself down from this rage. It's not in the dialogue, but you can see it visually. He's shaking. He grits his teeth and bites into his lips so hard that he starts bleeding. It would be so easy to just shoot this man and move on. All the damage he's done to the town, people have probably been injured and died because of this fight. But this man asked for his life, and Vash lets him go. Vash choosing mercy is such a show of his strength of character, because principle matters the most in the most difficult and extreme situations. Because that's when people are most willing to give up on their principles. Because it's hard. It's easy to spout principle when there isn't really anything on the line for you. The point of having a principle is to have an external guiding framework so that when you're in a spot of heightened emotion, you have something outside of yourself to fall back on. When you're in that spot of rage or sorrow or whatever emotion it is, you can't trust yourself to do the right thing. But when you want so badly to be the arbiter of justice, when you feel your rage is justified, when you're tired of being nice and you just want to go ape, Vash still chooses his pacifism. And it's not out of ignorance. It's not naivete. It's sacrifice. I think of this metal verse from the Bible where Jesus sends out his 12 apostles to go preach and do miracles. And he says, "Behold, I send thee forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." That's Vash. And when he lets Monv go, Monv says, "You're way too trusting." And Vash says, "My finger is still on the trigger. Shrewd as a serpent, gentle as a dove." And because Vash is such an incredible gunman and fighter, everyone who comes up against him soon comes to realize the only reason they aren't dead is because he chose to let them live. It's like in Full Metal Alchemist, which is my favorite show and manga of all time. Ed also does not kill, and he chooses not to kill Kimberly, who is like objectively the worst person in the entire show. And because of that decision not to kill him, Ed ends up impaled on a steel rod. And he says, if that's the cost of not taking a life, that's the price that I'm willing to pay. So Monv's backstory is different. He says he was bought by a man and trained for 20 years to be a killing machine. There's no mention of human experimentation or the Eye of Michael or knowing Vash before or anything like that. I think that the version of Monv in Stampede serves Stampede's story very well, and I think that this version of him serves the manga's story. And then after the fight, Millie and Meryl see Vash's scars, and Meryl asks him, why doesn't he just go into hiding, try to live out a quiet and peaceful life? And Vash says he can't. He still has to settle the score. He wouldn't be able to live with himself if he allowed himself to have the privilege of a normal life while Knives is still out there. And as they leave town, on the outskirts of the town, Vash finds Monv hung up and crucified by Legato and E.G. the Mine. It's pretty gruesome, and Vash is furious. He had hoped that this man whom he had spared would be able to do something with his life, to be free of the life just as a slave and a killing machine. The Mine just says, it's cleanup. Someone has to do it. It's kill or be killed. And Vash is like, that's not the world that Rem died for. We have other options. And he easily dismantles E.G. Mine's contraptions. Yeah, he beats him in like 2 panels. And he sees Legato like very far away standing in some ruins or something and fires a warning shot at him and says, "From now on, I'm the one hunting you. You better watch out, Legato. This game is toying with too many people's lives. You don't know what you're up against." I can only assume that Legato then killed E.G. Mine after that, but we're not given any information on what happens. And then Legato's chilling in a restaurant in Junora Rock, and a band of slavers comes through with a few captive girls, and they're causing a scene, and Legato makes the men rip out their own organs and kill each other. But he leaves the bystanders alone, which is strange to me because he's like, humanity is all going to be killed anyway. But like, why bother leaving the more innocent people alive? I don't know what makes him tick. Maybe he does have some sort of internal logic. Maybe he just says all this stuff about like humanity all needs to die, but he secretly does have some sort of moral compass. But for now, he just does things because he wants to. Like, those guys deserve to die, but Legato didn't kill them to save the victims. Like, the way that he kills them is so cruel and unusual. At some point, it stops becoming a justice killing and just becomes a gore fest. It seems like he just killed them because he was annoyed that they were bothering him. I think he likes toying with people. Like, he doesn't even know what's going on with himself. He's like, why did I do that? I don't know what's going on. I blame Vash. He's thrown me off my rhythm. It's like, bro, figure yourself out, man. I don't know where I'm going with all of this. I guess maybe it could be tempting to see this as a heroic thing on Legato's part, but it really is not. Sure, they're dead and they can't hurt anyone else, but now the victims are in just as vulnerable a state in a strange town with no money and no clothes and no resources, and who's to say they're not just going to get snapped up by the next predatory gang of men? And now they just witnessed this horrific gore fest that traumatized them even more by a guy who's like, I'm going to kill you all eventually, bye. And it's interesting that he doesn't even say that Knives is going to kill all of humanity. He's like, I'm going to kill humanity. Why does he want humanity dead? What is stopping him from just killing them all right now? Does he consider himself exempt from the rest of humanity? I can't get a good read on him yet. And I'm not alone in this, because we cut to Vash on his little bus in the desert. He's like, man, I could not get a read on that guy. He was not bluffing about, the killing people and stuff. But man, I do not want to have to fight him. He could kill me so bad. So yeah, maybe that's how I'm supposed to feel about Legato right now, because Vash kind of feels the same way. And now that Vash and the girls are on a bus, now for the part you've all been waiting for, Wolfwood. And he's only here for like 3 chapters. And I'm not alone roasting this guy. One of the first things that the bus driver and some of the passengers say to him, they're like, what kind of priest dresses like that? What a guy. And he gives me the worst case of cute aggression that I have ever felt for something that's not real. Like, look at him. I love the shape of him. His suit isn't drawn with any shading or lining or anything. He's just a black blob. But it's never difficult to read what he's doing. Like, I think Naito has a really good sense of shape and movement, since he's able to communicate so much through the way Wolfwood is drawn without putting any detail on him. Vash on the bus sees a speck on the horizon, which is Wolfwood with his giant cross. The way that they meet is so funny. Wolfwood says it's just because he recognizes Vash from his wanted poster, but he acts so familiar towards Vash. He yells his name and pinches his chin, which is the least normal thing to do to a guy you just met. Because I have the Stampede backstory cooking in the back of my mind, I think that Stampede could really play with this for season 2. What if this is how they first meet, but only for Vash, right? Vash says in the previous volume that he doesn't remember the July incident very well. And then later in this volume, we find out that use of his angel arm wiped his memory completely. I think Stampede could take this and have fun with it. Make them meet just like they meet in the manga, only Wolfwood already knows Vash, but Vash doesn't know him. What if the reason Wolfwood is so excited to see Vash is because he knew him from before? It would make more sense, I think, to pick up where Trimax starts, because the first chapter of Trimax, Vash is living as Eric's, and that's sort of where Stampede ended. But I had fun imagining this alternate reading where Wolfwood already knows him and Vash doesn't remember. That's why Wolfwood is so eager to share with him about the orphanage and his job as a priest and the smile thing. Wolfwood gives away some of his last bit of money to some children that were about to pickpocket him, and Vash smiles at that. He smiles at the kindness. And Wolfwood is like, so you can smile. Wolfwood says, I was worried. You always smile so cheerfully, but it's so empty it hurts to look at you. I see you hurting and grinning just to bear it. Like, are you sure? Are you sure you just met? That sounds like something you would say to someone that you know. And someone that you've seen a lot of their behavior. Not some guy you just sat with on the bus. I don't know, man. I think there's something there for Stampede Season 2 to play with, and I would like to see it. Anyway, yeah, Wolfwood has no money, and he gives away 2 of his last 3 coins to these would-be pickpockets. And I thought of, I don't remember the reference, but in the Bible there's a parable of the woman with 2 coins. Let me just read it so I don't mess it up. It says, and Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury, and many the rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. So like 2 copper coins. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Or, as another version says, for they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had. Vash sees kindness and sacrifice and is drawn to that. Even if he doesn't know much about Wolfwood yet, what he does see is someone who cares a lot. And Wolfwood in this says that he's a priest that's affiliated with this particular church and orphanage, and they're low on money, and so he goes and plies his trade to bring in funds for the orphanage. And while most priestly services are, or should be, free of charge, he has reason to request charitable donations. Okay, back to Legato. The rest of the slavers gang shows up to try to deal with Legato because they heard about this guy that just killed everybody. And he kills more of them, but decides to leave half of them alive for, again, arbitrary reasons. And then he rolls out with his posse of like 7 more gung-ho guns. We don't get all 12 of them in here, but we are told that there are 12. Like, Vash might be the Jesus allegory, but Knives wants to be Jesus so bad. He dies and is resurrected, and he has these 12 disciples gathered around him to do his bidding. He sees himself as like a savior figure, which means that maybe Wolfwood is not just Judas to Vash, but also to Knives. This is embarrassing for me. It took me until my second read-through to notice the resurrection and 12 disciples parallel, which is like the most basic Jesus lore ever. So Wolfwood leaves Vash once they get to Genora Rock. I love this panel. As he leaves, he says, if a good wind blows, I'll meet you again. May the Lord's divine protection be with you. And I just get the feeling that he means it. That just feels like something that a priest would say. I appreciate that he's not just a priest for the aesthetic, but there is an element of it that feels really genuine to me. I think because that last line is reminiscent of a blessing called the Birkat Kohanim, which says, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his face to you and give you peace. It's a very common blessing from the Torah that's used in Jewish and Christian liturgy, but many of his lines feel consistent with his station. So once they arrive at Genora Rock and Wolfwood leaves, Vash knows something is up even before he sees the field of blood left by Legato. He's approached by a woman who introduces herself as the 3rd gung-ho gun, Dominique the Cyclops. She reassures him that the ocean of blood is from slave traders. Vash says that's not the point. Like, that doesn't make it better for him. Who made you judge, jury, and executioner for these men? Which is also understandable because he has no way to corroborate her story. And he tells her he doesn't want a fight, but she goes ahead and starts a fight anyway. And she seems to have some sort of teleportation ability because she's wicked fast, and Vash cannot get the upper hand. She could have killed him several times, but she doesn't. She's toying with him. Meanwhile, Wolfwood heads to the church at Genora Rock, which is all the way at the peak of the rock. And he gets jumped and brought to Legato. And Legato seems to think that Wolfwood is someone called Chapel. I'm saving that information for later. I don't exactly know what to make of it. I don't know if this was a prearranged meeting, if Legato was expecting someone else and mistook the guy with the giant cross for someone named Chapel. Understandable. Because Wolfwood doesn't say that he is Chapel. Even if that's like a code name for him, he doesn't answer to that name. And he seems kind of confused by the nature of everything that's happening around him. He recognizes Legato not because he's seen him before, but from a description that Vash gave him. And he doesn't greet him as if he was expecting to be there. He's not part of Knives' organization or Legato's posse, as far as I can tell. It reads to me like Wolfwood was maybe hired to do a job and just didn't know what he was being hired for. And then Legato tells the assembled gung-ho guns that they're there to handle anything that happens, but particularly to handle Vash when he shows up. And Wolfwood is like, what am I doing here? Like, how did it come to this again? He's like, I'll never escape. They'll eat me alive if I do. Once again, I am told to kill, and if I try to leave from this, my life is forfeit. Back to Vash, he's able to figure out Dominique's tricks. She's using hypnosis. She has like a patched eye thing, and she's able to hypnotize him. And he's doing all this with one arm still, by the way. Like, Legato took his arm. I don't know what he's doing with it, but Legato has his robot arm. Girl, what is wrong with you? And then Dominique, without her hypnosis ability, is pretty easily beaten by Vash. And when she's defeated, rather than be killed by Legato for her failure, she just jumps off a cliff. It's crazy because she's not scared of Knives, she's scared of Legato. Legato is like the Azula to Knives' Ozai. Knives is the big bad. He's the main villain, but he only shows up for a fight at the end and doesn't have much else going on. Legato is the boots on the ground threat. And I don't know, man, it just seems like such a waste to kill all these people. Why is the punishment for failure so severe? And I'm not even saying that from like my pacifistic perspective. I'm saying that from like a practical perspective. How do you expect to keep an organization running when you kill all of your employees as soon as they make a mistake? And the more I think about it, the less all of this makes sense. Legato's like doing all this stuff on Knives' behalf, but how does he know what Knives wants? Knives has been functionally dead for years. I guess Legato could like read his mind and relay his orders, but like Knives is super dead, dude. He's so crunched up they can't even use his old body to resurrect him. They have to like xenomorph birth him out of another plant. And why is the plan to get Vash here so elaborate? Vash would probably find Knives as soon as he was reborn anyway. Backtracking. Okay, Vash passes out from his wounds after Dominique, and he wakes up screaming because he can sense that Knives has been reborn. And the girls are still with him. So Vash tells the girls to get out of there. And at this point, a lot of people are already evacuating. So Vash, who's like barely functioning at this point, hikes out to the church at the top of the rock. And it's really good posing and anatomy work here because it really looks like he's weighed down and staggering as he shoulders his way through these crowds that are all going in the opposite direction. And he's the only one that's going up towards the rock. As all the gung-ho guns are assembled, the doctor is there to begin or facilitate the resurrection process. Knives' rebirth scene is something else, dude. He's birthed fully grown out of another plant, and Legato is crying as he's watching Knives being born. And as all of this is going down, we occasionally cut to Wolfwood just being like, what is going on here? I'm gonna get so killed. So Vash is approaching. Knives was literally just born, and Legato, as he sees... Bro, he's not gonna kiss you. Legato, as he sees Vash approaching, is like gonna try to kill him. And then Knives just folds Legato, like literally folds him. He is crumpled on the floor. His foot is like up next to his head. And he's like, what do you think you're doing trying to kill my brother? Anyway, I just thought it was really funny. So Knives taunts Vash from a distance. He tries to goad him into using his angel arm again. And Vash doesn't know what he's talking about. And this is when we find out that Vash doesn't remember anything from before. He sees the doctor and seems to very faintly remember him, but can't place him. And as Vash is having these flashbacks, Knives, who was up on the rock, just kind of appears in front of him. And it's very jarring. This is the part that you might want to skip. I'll give you a timestamp here. But, yeah. If you thought that what happened in Stampede episodes 11 and 12 was assault coded, it has nothing on what happens at the end of this volume. It's extremely rapey. That's the only way I can describe it. It's hard to look at because of the undertones. Not even undertones. It's straight up overtones. Knives smothers Vash's face and mouth with his hand and gets behind him and forces the angel arm to appear. Grabs him, almost groping him in a way from behind to control where the arm is gonna fire. And the whole time Vash is screaming and sobbing. And Knives is completely nude during this whole scene. It's really awful. It's really awful. It's just... Vash is able to break free of Knives' grip by shooting through his own leg into Knives. And he's able to redirect the arm to fire it up into space where it blasts a hole in the moon. Yeah, I gotta say this version of Knives is something else, dude. There's no sympathy for him in this book. There's no real character building moments for him, no redeeming qualities, no insight into any shreds of humanity that he might retain, or any sort of love for his brother that he still has. And that's not to say that those things won't appear later in the story and be expanded upon, but I think Stampede really laid a lot of groundwork if Knives is ever going to have some kind of, not even a redemption arc, just some kind of like atonement arc or coming to a better place. We're starting from a really rough spot because there is no foundation for that to happen in Trigun. That's not to say that it couldn't happen, that it wouldn't be built up in Maximum, but this version of Knives is something horrendous. We also don't see any love on Vash's side for Nye in these volumes. His thought is just to settle the score. There's no indication that love still remains between them. So Vash, as his weapon arm of mass destruction, fires against his will. He thinks that they should never have been born. He thinks that he should never have been born. And then he disappears. The townspeople witnessing the aftermath of this destruction, they think that the devil now walks among them. Wolfwood wonders if Vash and Knives are angels of judgment sent by God, and the whole world lives in fear of the devil coming back to raise the rest of humanity someday. And the volume ends with Millie and Meryl and Wolfwood among the rubble, and the scorched remains of Vash's coat are staked like a flag on some twisted rebar in the middle of the destruction. And that's it. This really feels like an excellent setup for a much bigger story. The first arc of the first volume is like an introduction to the world, a little taste of what's to come. The second arc is the breathing space between the two. And the third arc slams you with a lot of things that we don't have time to explore or even explain, then hits you with an ending that feels like it could be the final climax of the series. Which is probably intentional because if I remember correctly, Naito-sensei wasn't sure if he was going to get to serialize the rest of the story. But could you imagine if that was it? Bruh. If it just ended there and you got no more Trigun? I would lose my mind. I would be so consumed by how good it was, and it'd be one of those things that I would just be wondering about for the rest of my life. Yeah, anyway, fortunately that's not the world we live in. We have Trigun Maximum. It was a very good read. As brutal as the ending was, I think it was incredibly well written. The fact that it disturbed me the way that it did was a testament to the skill of the writing and the storytelling. Okay, I need to go return this to the library because it's due today. I never know what to call these first two volumes. The Trigun manga that's not Trigun Maximum. Because it's just Trigun. But if I say Trigun, I could be referring to the franchise as a whole, or I could just be referring to the manga or just one of the shows. I haven't seen anyone use a specific name for it. I guess maybe it just gets lumped under Trimax because it's part of the manga. I don't know, Trigun Original, Trigun Ultimate, Trigun Deep Space Planet Future Gun Action. It's just word salad, but it's so fun. Everything in Trigun just suffers from awesome McCool name. And you have to decide if you're going to be a hater or if you're just going to roll with it. Before I even started the show, I heard that the main villain's name was Million's Knives, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. There were two wolves inside of me, and one of them was like, bruh, and the other one was like, that rules. And I couldn't figure out if I loved it or I hated it. So I decided to kill the part of me that cringes, and I'm obsessed with the name Million's Knives as a concept. It's just so funny. It's so incredibly awesome. I do think that the Knives Nye name change in Stampede was an inspired choice, though. Giving him a regular name and then making Million's Knives a name that he chose for himself makes so much more sense. It just makes no sense for a child to be named Knives out the womb. So as much as I love the name, I really, really appreciate that Stampede took a little risk and it paid off. So that was Trigun Volume 2. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you later.